This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Friends, we're grateful you're here for what promises to be a challenging conversation. The Alberta government taking aim, you know this deal, at books in school libraries. And this, if ever there was one, I think a gray area issue where real talkers are landing all across the spectrum. We have real talkers that cannot believe that such smut would be available for K through 9 or even high school students to come across or maybe even check out in the library. We have real talkers that believe that young people go on journeys through the prepubescent or the preteen years and discover things on their own and need to understand how to seek out information in earnest from credible sources and be challenged, but also that parents and teachers want to understand what kids are reading and it shouldn't be a free-for-all. And then there are real talkers that believe that everybody should just GTFO with the library, quit worrying about what the kids are doing. This is their journey, not yours, and how dare you interfere? Well, in this episode, we promise you we're going to take a more fulsome look at the story that's been making news, albeit not the top headline. The Prime Minister met with Canada's premiers, the First Ministers, just hours ago. We talked to Senator Charles Adler about that in our most recent episode. Yeah, there's like a healthcare crisis and big measles outbreaks, and there's a lot happening, not to mention the Stanley Cup Finals, but this is an issue that we wanted to make sure didn't just get swept under the rug. Because if you're like me, you believe that there's probably a little bit more to this. There's probably a reason why the Alberta government is taking aim at these books in school libraries. It's probably not maybe the elected representatives themselves that are feeling like this is the biggest deal. So why is this a priority? But bigger picture, we're asking, are Alberta or Canadian school libraries polluted with explicit and age-inappropriate material? And ultimately, who should be deciding what books are on the shelves? All of this coming up in 30 seconds. First, I want to let you know that our friends at We Know Training are very proudly presenting sponsors of this episode, this great conversation, and that's nothing new for them. They understand trust almost better than anybody else. In fact, in a world where credentials and compliance really matters, especially in regulated industries, We Know Training is building something bigger than just training courses. They're creating the infrastructure of trust. And that means when somebody says they're certified, whether they're looking after your gran in the long-term care center or running a forklift on a job site, you can believe that they're certified because they're all backed by digital credentials. They can't be faked. And that's something that every industry needs right now. If you're in charge of training, credentialing for your company, you're going to want to check out their website at wkt.ca. We Know Training partnering with governments, regulators, and businesses across the country to manage entire credentialing programs. Think of it as plug-and-play training that's built for trust, compliance, and real-world impact. We Know Training online. Check them out today at wkt.ca. As we say hello to the president of the Library Association of Alberta, Laura Winton, joining us in studio. Laura, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And we're welcoming a colleague of yours from all the way across the country, from the Big Smoke. Jim Turk is the director of the Center for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. Jim, thanks for making time for us and welcome to Real Talk.
My pleasure to be here, Ryan.
I was just encouraging Laura to treat this like we're all out for coffees, to jump in at any point, to add to what each other is saying, to challenge what you hear from the host. Please do speak freely. I guess that's kind of part of the theme today. Laura, how did this government initiative, when the Minister of Education, the Premier, announced that they were discovering age-inappropriate and explicit books in Alberta libraries, You, of course, I would imagine, as the president of the Library Association of Alberta, perked right up when you heard that. How did it land?
Yeah, I mean, we were surprised and concerned. We hadn't heard about this previously, so we would have hoped, like the school boards, that if the government was having concerns about materials in library, that they might have come to us and talked to us a little bit about it before, going ahead with this big announcement about new policies. One of the things that I think it's important to know is that school library boards have policies in place that govern what ends up in our school libraries, and there's processes for reconsidering material, all of that stuff. So, we were surprised and certainly concerned.
So this is, I think, number one, it's an issue that, like we said, lands across the spectrum because people are going to read, and I'll let our audience know that, maybe if you have younger eyes and ears in the house, maybe this isn't the episode for them, even though we're talking about kids' libraries, or maybe that kind of proves the point. People say, well, hey, if kids should be able to hear this, then what are you worried about? But I am going to read some passages from some of the books that the government's identified as problematic to kind of give people a sense of what we're talking about. But it really has put this issue on people's radar. For a lot of folks, might not have been something they thought about, may not have thought that there was explicit material at school libraries.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important to keep in mind with the books that are specifically mentioned here, they are coming-of-age stories. And I think one of the things that is a bit misleading about the survey and the excerpts that have been pulled out is that they are just that, excerpts, and they've been pulled completely out of context for those books. So, they're absolutely, there's sexual material in there. Those are things that kids are dealing with and learning about as they come of age. And so, that is something that's in the story, but it's not a hustler magazine, as we've heard the premier say. It is in the context of a broader story that talks about relationships and puts that journey to discovering your sexuality really in a story that can be hugely meaningful for young adults and kids.
I'm going to follow up on that in just a bit, and how do we pick the books and how do you determine what's age appropriate? But Jim, to bring you in, what was your very first response, or what was your first thought when you heard that the Alberta government was opening this up to public consultation and making this an issue right now?
Well, my first thought was, where was this coming from? As Laura has told you, it's not an issue that the government has raised with the Library Association of Alberta or with school boards. It seemed to come out of the blue. And so it struck me, to be honest, it struck me as well. The UCP is trying to feed its base with red meat in the same way all the talk about sovereignty and separatism at a time when the government is under some serious problems with what's happened in the Alberta Health Services. So it struck me initially as well, they're just trying to draw attention to an issue and make outrageous claims. And then when I looked into it a little bit, I saw that, in fact, the minister seems to have misrepresented what was happening. He described it as, well, I was talking with some concerned parents. They drew my attention to these books and how awful they are. When in fact, two of the biggest pretty right-wing parents' rights groups in Alberta, and one of the biggest in the country, are the ones who've been behind this and celebrated it on their websites and talked about how they'd been pressing the government for months about this. So it was hardly a recent phenomenon the way the minister described it.
Yeah, Jim, you're talking about Action for Canada, correct? Just so I'm clear.
Yes, Action for Canada, which started out as an anti-masking, anti-vaxxer group in southern British Columbia, and now claims that they have 99 chapters across the country and are pushing a strong agenda, basically saying people should homeschool, that schools, whether they be public schools or Catholic schools or separate schools or charter schools, are not where kids should be, because there's a global agenda being pushed on them. So they're pretty far right groups. They've latched on to issues of sex education for kids, and they're strongly anti-LGBTQ. So any books that portray a positive view of people who are LGBTQ come within their zone of attack.
Okay, so people can check out that website. It's actionforcanada.com, action, the number 4, canada.com. And the headline reads, Action for Canada is pleased to announce a massive win in Alberta against the pornographic books. Most importantly, this is a victory for our precious children. Praise God. It goes on to thank the Alberta Minister of Education, Dimitrios Nicolaitis, for meeting with Action for Canada's team, for responding to their concerns, and for acknowledging the evidence of sexually explicit materials in Alberta schools. They call it a positive step toward restoring morality and common sense in education. Let me read. I mean, these are the books that the government selected, okay? So these are the books that the government's holding up as an example. We read from this book, Fun Home, in Past from Alison Bechdel, which, by the way, a New York Times bestseller, worth noting. Page 109, budding, the only possible word to describe the painful, itchy beginnings of my breasts at 12. It's true I had not wanted to grow breasts, but it never occurred to me that they would hurt. The illustration on the bottom left side of the page depicts a zoomed-in view of prepubescent breasts. The image contains the labels swollen and tender. That sounds like Beverly Cleary in the 1980s to me. That doesn't sound like porn.
Well, I mean, it's a coming-of-age novel, right? And, I was a 12-year-old girl once myself, and, that's an experience you had to figure out on your own. So in a lot of ways, I think it's really important to have books like this available so, we can help our young kids figure out their way through this.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to read some other words that I'm uncomfortable reading, but we're just going to do it. It's Real Talk. We're independent. We can do it, but I apologize in advance. It is what it is. A book called Blankets, the author Craig Thompson, page 21. Your dad looks like a Mexican, too poor to feed you. Your mom is so religious it makes everyone in town sick, and your little brother with his messy hair and stupid voice must be retarded. We look at a word like that, we go, you kind of wince when you hear me say it. I get hesitant to say it because we don't really say that word anymore, and we know that it's hurtful. Why is it important, or how is it justifiable in a book in a library?
Well, I mean, I think we need to keep in mind that, just because it makes us uncomfortable to hear that doesn't mean that we don't live in a world where, that word is thrown around, where people don't experience hearing that word and the hurt that comes with it. And so, having books on our shelves that let kids explore and think about that show empathetic portraits of what it's like to live through that kind of abuse and bullying. That's important, and I think it's also really important that these books are being presented in school libraries where you have trained educators on hand, trained librarians on hand, and they're there to help kids make selections that are appropriate for their age, for what they want and need to be exploring.
Jim, as mentioned, you're the director of the Center for Free Expression, and I'm curious to know through that lens how you perceive, some of the passages that we're reading, Laura's intuitive comments about just because things make us uncomfortable doesn't mean they don't belong in a library. How do you process that?
Well, I mean, there's any number of ways to process it. If the Edmonton Public Library removed every book that somebody in Edmonton felt was inappropriate in the library, they'd have almost nothing left in their collection, given the diversity of people in the library. So the central issue here, Ryan, is who decides what books should be in libraries? And with regard to school libraries, my view is that those difficult decisions should be made by educators and trained librarians, not by politicians. And who should decide what books should be in public libraries? Well, it should be library staff who have the training to sort amongst these things. And the sections you've read, as Laura is saying, these are coming of age books. Young adults from 12 on are thinking about these things. Most parents would like to imagine that their 14-year-olds aren't thinking about sex, but I remember in my days, my parents didn't think, and so I'd have to find information other ways, go to book stands and look at Playboys and other. Kids are amazingly creative. And so most of the books that are being objected to here are books that are really amongst the best in dealing with issues that are important to young adults. Yes, they shouldn't be in grade 5 or 6 or 4 school libraries, and they aren't. Just one last thing, Ryan. You were reading from Blankets, which is one of the books he's held out. Now, let me just read you a couple quick reviews, and all this is on the Center for Free Expression website. We have a profile of each of these books. The Guardian Weekly described it as one of the best graphic novels of all time. While the young artist is at the heart of this fine work, everyone in Blankets has a spark and an inner life, and the fluid panels tease out character with subtlety and generosity. It's a touching, passionate account of growing up. Time magazine refers to Blankets as a great American novel. It sets new bars for the medium, not just in length, but in breadth. It won the award for the best comic novel of the past decade. So we're not talking about some piece of garbage as the government is trying to describe, but a book that's been well reviewed. I mean, I could read you similar reviews from numerous publications that hold this out as an actually fine book. It does deal with difficult issues, but young people these days are dealing with difficult issues.
Well, and
if
Jim,
their
if I
parents
could-
would rather them find out information on the street rather than carefully curated, excellent pieces of literature, I think that's a mistake if they deny students access to this kind of information.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say, in response to Jim as well, Blankets is a book that I studied in library school 12 years ago, and the focus of that reading in that class was how do we take a text like this and introduce it at an appropriate level and work with children with this text so that it is meaningful and useful to them.
Okay,
So
let me, and I'm not cutting you off. I want to actually open the door for you to tell us more about that, but I want more context here. By the way, live chat powered by Park Power, best damn live chat of any Canadian talk show. Guarantee that to be true. By the way, Laura's a real talker, everybody. She reached out after I was talking about this earlier. She said, you got to get a librarian on. I said, obviously, come join us. Get in here. Tyler in the live chat, powered by Park Power, says, I'm so frustrated with this government pulling stunts like this. Parents are giving their phones with easy access to porn to kids, but then they're pissed with libraries for having graphic material. Grow up, people. Lori says, Danielle Smith is carrying out Project 2025 better than Donald Trump is. Tracy says, Ryan, you're doing exactly what she said is not appropriate. You're taking things out of context. It's not out of context if I let you know it's out of context. I'm just telling you this is the release. Like I'm showing you this. I guess I could show you the digital copy, but this is what the government sent us. 6 pages to all members of the media. Examples of explicit quotes. Have you seen this in person? It's examples of explicit quotes.
well, and I think
Same book, but I want to get into Blankets, but like here's more from Blankets. Page 517. In one of my classes, a student made a ceramic sculpture of a naked female torso. Oh my. No, I haven't got to the worst part yet. The worst part is that during the critique, he proceeded to stroke and lick the nipples on the sculpture. Sounds funny to me. What about this one? There she lusted after her lovers whose genitals were like those of donkeys and whose emission was like that of horses. Oh, no, pardon me. That's Ezekiel. That's in the Bible. Pardon me. Out of context. How do you decide? Take us into this library school. Take us into this class where you're taking a look at a book like Blankets and you're deciding what is age appropriate, when is the right time. Help us understand the process.
Yeah, what does that look like? I mean, I think there's lots of pieces to it, right? Like, librarians, we have master's degrees. We spend a lot of our time in library school looking at and thinking about collection development and what goes in what sections and what is age appropriate. In addition to that, I think it's important to know that, publishers provide information on the age appropriateness of books in MARC records and all sorts of other information that we get as librarians. So we have a starting point, and we have actually multiple levels of experts telling us where certain material should fit within a library collection. And then you also have a hands-on person, a librarian or an educator looking at that book as well. So I think, if there is a problem here, the problem is that we don't have the funds in schools anymore to necessarily have as many library workers as we would want to have to do that additional vetting. So, I mean, from the LAA's, the Library Association of Alberta's perspective, a major issue here is funding, and this we're seeing as a real distraction from that major issue. My sister's a teacher, and she sort of laughed when this came out and said, well, I mean, they can put together whatever policies they want, but I don't know who they think are going to implement it, because we're barely surviving our days here.
Yeah,
So.
we had an email from a real talker she's a junior high school teacher. She shared with us by the name of Jillian. She basically told us that their school did everything they could. The last librarian, who was, I think, on the precipice of retirement, left a little bit early so they could keep their one EA. But she says not having a librarian in there means, obviously, that kind of that direct, I don't know if you'd word like supervision or monitoring, or that direct interaction between librarians and students doesn't happen as frequently as she'd like, which should be troubling to anybody for a number of different reasons. Jim, a lot of parents obviously believe that they should have a say, and I want to get into our live chat again. I want everybody to have a say on this, and you can always send us an email after the fact to talk@ryanjespersen.com, or leave a comment on our YouTube episode. Leave a comment on Spotify if that's where you're hearing this. Jim, parents obviously want to know and have a say in what books their kids are exposed to in school. So We hear a lot about the parents' rights movements, like capital P, capital R. So how do you reconcile parents' rights to students' rights to access a broad range of ideas?
I mean, it's very interesting that in international law, there's not actually rights of parents. There's responsibilities of parents. The people who have rights are children. The instrument of international law that's been ratified by more countries in the world is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's been ratified by 196 countries. There's only one country in the world that hasn't ratified it, and that's the United States.
Wow.
And it talks about children as they mature and develop should have more and more rights about control of their own lives and what they do. So the parents' rights groups, for the most part, continue to have a very old-fashioned notion, essentially, that children are their property and they get to direct them, when in fact, I mean, I would ask you or any member of the audience to think about when they were growing up. And there's always tension between what a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old feels is appropriate and they'd like to do and what their parents would want them to do. And they know they do all sorts of things that their parents would be outraged if they, there's a tension around that. And with library books, libraries want to make material relevant for the users of the library. Nobody's forced to read any book, but you're providing options. And so kids deal with a lot of difficult issues in their homes or in their lives, and reading literature that deals with difficult issues is often one of the ways they cope with the world. And to deny that to them because parents don't feel they have a right to do that, especially for teenagers, is a notion that probably all of us have experienced as teenagers. That's how our parents felt, but all of us were grateful that we were creative and found other ways to cope with worlds. And I don't know a better way than to have carefully curated books that deal with difficult issues than just learning on the street from misinformation from friends or from unreliable sources.
Yeah, it's not lost on me that we're talking during Pride Month as well. And I know that, people have quite rightfully pointed out many times to this show in direct correspondence that there's one common theme with almost all of these books that have been identified. And while they may not be directly LGBTQ2S plus material, it may be adjacent, or at least there's kind of that theme running through it. And I think a lot of people that are young adults or maybe mature adults right now telling their own stories, their courageous stories during Pride, will probably look back and reflect. I've seen a couple anecdotally, one from a dear family member already in the past couple of days, about the role that literature and other education resources played in their development and their sense of self and self-worth, when a lot of the other approved material that was in front of them, much of it was religious, was prompting them and causing them to question their very worth as human beings as well. And I do think that's important to point out. Absolutely. In our live chat, Erica says it's hard to define what's explicit and obscene, but like Potter Stewart said, you know it when you see it. Erica says, or maybe read it in this case. Whiterium says, being a summer camp counselor for years of ages 9 to 18, these books are not an issue for what the kids are talking about or asking about at that age. Others of you are pointing out, again, about your personal experience. Wobbly Ink says, my mom never talked to me about puberty and periods. I learned about these things from my older sister and the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Wobbly Ink says, books are so important for young people. Laura, you are, again, the president of the Library Association of Alberta, but you're also a mom.
I sure am.
Do you wear two different hats in this conversation, or is it the same hat for you?
I mean, I think that there are, two different hats for sure. I'm a parent and a librarian, and my librarian hat tells me certain things about, what I know is true and how things work in libraries, and the fact that we're already doing this work. But I think one of the pieces as a parent that really gets left out of the discussions of parents' rights is, like, which parents' rights are we talking about? Because it's incredibly important to me that my daughter in grade 3 and my son in kindergarten, and I have a third on the way here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I want them to have access to this material. And so, when these parents' rights organizations get involved and say, this is inappropriate, we need to take this away. Well, you as an individual can help guide your child however you want in terms of what they're going to read. But if you're talking about removing it from a library, then you're removing access for everyone, and you're removing access for my children as well. And that is censorship. And that is not appropriate. And if you believe in parents' rights, then you're taking away my rights as a parent. So
well, I love that you bring that point up. And Jim, I guess, like, Center for Free Expression, where you're the director, Chapter that's kind of interesting, is it? Because I know that a lot of the folks that right now would be pushing for what Laura's describing as censorship are also folks that are probably pretty big on freedom. They probably want small government. They probably want people staying out of their lives. Does that make them hypocrites?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different people who are committed to freedom, as we are. There's a very libertarian view of the sort that you described, that they just want government to stay out of their lives. They want small. That's not my view. I want a more socially just society. And I think that one of the ways we have a more socially just society is by giving people rights to speak out, to engage in public discourse, to have the discussions we're having right now. It's very healthy. Society does have to decide what are the limits to what we're going to make available through our libraries or otherwise publicly. And I go back to what I think is the central issue here. Should it be politicians picking up issues because it advantages them politically who decide what books should be in our libraries? Or should it be, for school libraries, should be educators and librarians who are trained to assess each of these books? And if we want to remove every book that discusses difficult issues from a school library, it's going to be a useless school library. So which of those books discussing difficult issues should be in the library? Well, virtually every book that Action for Canada has identified is an award-winning book. It's been recognized. It's well-reviewed. In the case of blankets, it's been translated into by publishers into more than 50 different languages. And so decisions should be made by those with the ability and knowledge and understanding of child development, not by politicians who are trying to advance their careers.
Yeah, Super Chat Ken, I see in there also saying we got to remember, like, you know, a lot of this stuff, especially in this news release, it's saying that these books were discovered. It's all loaded language too, but the books are discovered in K to 9 schools, and he's like, you know, K is not the same as 9. Right?
Absolutely. We're talking about a really large age range here, right?
Are kindergarten kids in the, I don't remember, it's been like 30 years for me, but are kindergarten kids in the grade 9 section? Is there like,
not typically.
Are there like the saloon doors? Remember the old video stores, the grade 9s can go through?
No, we don't have beaded curtains or anything,
That's too bad.
you know, keeping those material away for those children. But, you know, certainly if you're visiting, you know, I have a kindergarten son. When he goes to the library with his class, his teacher or EA is with him, and they're guiding them to the picture books and the early readers, and they're not walking them over to the young adult graphic novel section. That's not happening. And I think it's also really important to note that, you know, you're reading some passages of Blankets. Blankets is a book that's like 500 plus pages. So even if my son were to stumble across that in their library, the chances that he's going to be getting to that specific page, like, it's not going to happen. Also, he can't read it and he wouldn't understand it. So what is the real danger here?
Okay, I want to ask, we're going to take a quick break, and I want to ask the two of you when we come back, are you concerned what could actually happen here? The public's being engaged, and at some point, the government does, I mean, the Minister of Education does hold the hammer, right? We got a teacher strike looming. I'm not trying to manifest it and make it happen, but there's a lot of balls in the air right now, and the dynamic right now in education is serious. The temperature is hot. We're hearing from people across Canada, though. M. Black is watching us from New Brunswick, says maybe it's different in Alberta, but where I come from, schools are lucky to even have a library. That from M. Black, which is an interesting point. Others of you say, you know, Dubious says these same right-wing parents have their kids watching like Manosphere podcasts and streamers. Let's get real. Let us know what you think on this. Dubious says Andrew Tate is much worse than the book Blankets. I guarantee you that. Yeah, Dubious, you're not wrong. More with these two. That's Jim Turk out of Toronto Metropolitan University Center for Free Expression. Laura Winton's hanging out with us. She's the president of the Library Association of Alberta. First, though, for those of you arts lovers, I want to make sure that Edmonton Opera is on your radar right now. This is a highly anticipated production building on Das Rheingold. The next installment of The Ring Cycle brings a bold new vision of Diabol Curry to life in an intimate, adaptive production directed for a smaller space at the McLab Theatre at the Citadel. Absolutely beautiful in collaboration with the Citadel. An innovative retelling invites the audience much closer than ever to drama, power, and the emotional depth of Wagner's iconic work, including a new arrangement by Jonathan Dove modernizing Wagner's work and a really intimate setting. So the audience, you, are going to be a lot closer to the action than the Jubilee, like a traditional opera house. This is the first time for the Edmonton audience to experience not only Di Valkyrie, but also Russell Braun in a conductor role. He's normally an opera singer, so this is a new adventure for him. Super cool. This should be wonderful for both Wagner enthusiasts and new opera fans. Kind of a unique blend of tradition and modern storytelling. All of this kicking off June 5th to the 13th at the McLab Theater. You can get your tickets at edmontonopera.com before they vanish into legend. Of course, the other big thing happening in Edmonton over the next couple of weeks, do I have to tell you? The Stanley Cup Final is your Edmonton Oilers take on the Florida Panthers for hockey's greatest grail. Our friends at the Edmonton Chamber, you can find them on Instagram, have your playoff-ready business toolkit. How cool is that? Promotional ideas, printable signs, social media templates, loyalty strategies, member-exclusive swag offers. Just another benefit of membership to the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. If you're not yet a member, join Relay, join us, and thousands of others. Strengthen your business, support your community. Pick up a membership today at edmontonchamber.com. We're talking today about the kids, looking out for the kids. Nobody does that better and more on the front line than the team at UCAN Youth Services. You can see them online at ucan.ca. Check out their work, including that relentless outreach program that they've got. They've got a list of 50 young kids, 12 to 17, they're working with. These are the 50 kids that are most interacting with Edmonton police officers, not in a good way, but UCAN Youth Services' relentless outreach workers stop at nothing to help out these young people, to empower them, to assist them to make positive decisions with peer groups, housing, maybe getting back into school. And the proof of performance is truly, truly inspiring. You can learn more about what they're doing, sign up to volunteer, maybe make a donation. Consider UCAN Youth Services as part of your corporate donation strategy. Again, you'll find them online at ucan.ca. We're hanging out with Laura Winton. She's the president of the Library Association of Alberta. Jim Turk, the director of the Centre for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. So, Laura, I guess all of this could get to a point where the Alberta government consults with the public, they take their findings back, and they come up with a strategy that works for them politically, and, of course, that satisfies whatever mandate it is that they're pursuing with this. What's worst case scenario for you, or at least what's on your radar? What are you concerned about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that when you look at the survey itself, it is very leading. It is designed to get a certain outcome, and we know that we have two groups, Parents for Choice and Education and Action for Canada, who are rallying their supporters and very well mobilized to get people out there to fill in this survey. So, from my perspective, the results of the survey are a foregone conclusion, especially given how it's written. And so, I think they will get the results they're looking for, which will say, yeah, we want some sort of regulation around sexually explicit material, and then we have to deal, and they will have to deal with the question of what does that mean when it comes to policy. They say they're not going to ban specific books, so we know it's not going to be a list of those 4 titles. So it's going to be broad. It's going to say, things like the laws in Florida are saying. And once we're into that territory, librarians are going to have and school boards are going to have a really difficult task of figuring out what does that mean. And I think when you start putting regulations like this in place, there's some fear there for school boards, and they're likely to interpret this narrowly, right? Or broadly, rather. And they're going to start pulling more material than just those 4 titles. So we're going to lose more than just, 4 graphic novels that we might not like. We're going to be in a situation where what ends up on those school library shelves is significantly restricted.
Jim, what does that say about a province? What does that say about a jurisdiction? What does it say, about Alberta?
Well, I'm afraid it doesn't say anything good. When I first commented on this, the minister had responded to a number of us saying, well, this isn't about censorship. But then, having studied the history of censorship, going back to putting Socrates to death for corrupting the youth of Athens, everyone who engages in censorship denies that it's censorship. And this is most assuredly what the government is doing. It's saying, it's not telling the public this, but for political reasons, we want to highlight this issue, and we're going to step in, and we're going to protect your kids from seeing any of this smut. when in fact the so-called smut is in fact award-winning books that deal with really important issues for young kids. And you had said largely correctly, Ryan, that this is about LGBTQ positive books, but it's also about any books on sex education. There are wonderful books on sex education, one by Corey Silverberg called Sex is a Funny Word, or another one, Where Do Babies Come From, that are oriented to young children to begin the discussions of these things and to help parents have these discussions. And they're equally a target of Action for Canada. In fact, the Action for Canada list, which they're quite public about, and which is the list they gave the minister, has 62 books on it. All of them, or virtually every one of them, is amongst the best in its field that they want to get rid of.
Okay, so let me ask both of you
the
this.
minister is picking this up and carrying their agenda is a real worry.
Jim,
for the
what
quality of education in this province?
So aside from and I think I know the answer, but I'd rather have you say it, both of you. Aside from Alberta's reputation, which is just my egomaniac concern here, because I'm a proud Albertan and I don't want us looking like we're a bunch of hillbillies from the sticks.
As am
we don't want our
proud
kids,
Albertan here,
right? I think that Alberta has a ton of really forward-thinking, wonderful, brilliant people that also care very deeply about their kids and their families in the future. But what happens in this, this future that books are pulled from shelves and that access to information is limited? And Jim, what's kind of the end result, 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line?
Well, hopefully that if the government does this, there's going to be some court challenges to what they've done, and whether schools and the government itself are obligated to act in a manner consistent with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And arguably some of the censorship they're calling might well be a violation of that charter. But what's really troubling, Ryan, is that they're picking up an agenda from a group. I mean, let me read you one sentence about what Action for Canada thinks about schools. Public schools at all levels, I'm quoting from their website, public schools at all levels of education currently pose a serious threat to our children due to the globalist agenda to use them as agents for change. They really are opposed to public education. What they spend a lot of their time doing is trying to persuade parents to pull their kids out of school and to homeschool them. And they provide webinars for homeschooling. So we're talking about an organization that has a desire to destroy the public school system, and we have a government that's embracing that agenda.
What do you think is worst case scenario, or what sort of an impact would you forecast 10, 15 years down the line?
I mean, I agree with everything that Jim said. And I also think, I think about my own children who will be in high school in 10 to 15 years and they won't have access to the resources that they need to understand what's happening in their lives and the lives of the people around them. I think that Jim is right in thinking that, we're going to start with sexually explicit material, but there is a clear anti-LGBTQ bent here. And so we're going to see that material disappear. We're going to see sex ed material disappear, and that's going to have a hugely detrimental effect on our children. And we know what happens when censorship comes into schools and kids don't have access to this material. We've seen it in Florida, and so I think we need to be really wary of that, and we need to be wary of a government that is, being directed by right-wing conservative Christian groups. It won't end with libraries.
Could I just add something, Ryan?
Of course, Jim.
I think if any of us remembers our teenage years, we're curious. There's things happening to our bodies. There's things happening in our relations. There's a whole variety of emotions we have. Hormones are developing. So kids are going to get information. The question is where? And what the government is saying is, well, we don't want you to get that information from the material that's been widely recognized as excellent in providing this, so you're going to have to find it on your own. And so they're consigning the young people of Alberta to having to find other sources, because I don't know a single parent. I have 3 kids. I have 5 grandchildren. They're all curious. They want to find things out, and if you deny them the kinds of sources that would be appropriate, they're going to find other sources that aren't so appropriate. So I think this is really a short-sighted approach that will harm kids far more than help them.
And Bustion in our live chat powered by Park Power says the thing is you can already write in to get them to look at banning or moving a book to a different section. Why is the government doing this? Is that true? And if so,
Absolutely.
do people ever do that?
Yes, all the time. Every public library I know, and I know school libraries have them as well, have policies on reconsideration of library material. In fact, the Centre for Free Expression in the Canadian Federation of Library Associations maintains a database of challenges that have come into material over the course of the last number of years. We are seeing trending data that says it's increasingly challenges to LGBTQ material, but I think people also have to keep in mind that we've also seen challenges to anti-vax material and material that would be thought of as more traditionally right wing. So if you're leaning towards the side of yes, let's limit these materials, I think you also have to think about, well, is it going to end at the materials that I don't like, or is it possible that somebody else is going to start going after the materials that I like as well? We always say that there's something in a library to offend everyone, and
Sure.
that is true, right?
Kind of should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the foundations of democracy, this is one of the fundamental beliefs of librarianship, is foundation of democracy is access to information and intellectual freedom. You can't have a strong democracy without different ideas and viewpoints out there and available freely to the public.
Do you pick up right now a mistrust between parents and educators, or do you think that this issue is kind of creating a perception of such that maybe doesn't exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really important question. Like, how much of this is a picture that's being painted for us of a much more fraught situation between parents and educators? I certainly know that for myself as a parent, and when I talk to other parents, the real concern that we're having is, my daughter was in a grade 2 class of 38 students last year, and that school no longer has a library at all because the funding isn't there for education right now. That's a much bigger concern for me than the fact that an award-winning graphic novel that might have a blowjob in it is on the shelves in a library in a high school somewhere.
Jim, let me ask you this in closing. Where's the middle ground here? For people that are, would describe themselves as concerned parents or parents that want to be aware, librarians, educators that are trying to navigate this moment, in the general public, what's the reasonable way forward?
The reasonable way forward is there are difficult decisions that have to be made about whether any particular book is appropriate, and if so, for what age. And that decision should not be made by the Minister of Education or by politicians wanting to win votes. It should be made by educators who have the best interests of the child at heart and have the knowledge and experience to decide what's appropriate for what ages. And if anything, as Laura has said, I think quite eloquently, to the extent there's a problem in schools, it's because the government of Alberta has systematically underfunded its public education system. So there are large class sizes. Most schools don't even have a school librarian, teacher librarian in them. And so they're having to navigate a very difficult situation. So if the government would get off this tack and provide some adequate funding, it would deal with the problems they're raising.
Laura, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm so grateful for having the opportunity to have this conversation. I think that there's a real danger here that I think people need to be aware of. I think the government is playing a particular narrative right now about what these horrible materials in school libraries that is just not accurate. We are. Schools have trained librarians and educators. We should have more of them, but they do exist. Policies exist. Why do we need new policies that are not written by experts who have training in how to select for children? I think we need to focus on funding our school systems, as Jim said, so that we can have those trained professionals. And I will also say, the LAA is very hopeful that we'll be able to meet with the minister. We've requested a meeting, and we're just going to stay on that and try to make sure that, along with Action for Canada and PCE, library professionals are part of this conversation.
That's Parents for Choice and Education, Action for Canada, the two groups that have been lobbying the government for this move. Have they responded to you? Has the minister's office responded to your request for an interview?
Not yet. We got a canned response saying we've received it, but there's a high volume, so I am just, emailing
I wonder in an issue relating to library books if there's been like a really high volume of province-wide library associations that are trying to get in touch. I would think that might be the group that would be at the top of the list they might want to talk to.
We would hope.
Jim, you look like you want to say something.
I do want to say something. There's another irony here. The minister has drawn attention to 4 books. I think there'll be more about Albertans who've read those 4 books than anything the publisher could have done to promote their books. So that's one of the ironies of censorship. It actually draws more attention to the very item that the censor wants to get rid of.
The Streisand effect, they call it.
I can tell you the holds lists on those books at my library, they are long all of a sudden.
Is that right?
Yes.
Adults trying to check them out.
Absolutely. And
We
I'm sure
realized that
some
we-
young adults.
Yeah, we realized that we were robbed
Yeah.
in our
Well, it's not only
1980s
adults,
curriculum.
As Laura's saying, I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of kids in Alberta who now desperately want to read those books to see what this controversy is about.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like the best move that ever happened for album sales was that explicit content label. Right?
100%.
Everybody says as soon as the explicit content label went on, sales just went through the roof.
You tell them they can't have it, and do they want it all of a sudden?
That's right. You can
Now,
check.
unfortunately, these are award-winning books, so they're actually reading something worthwhile. But it
fair
should be
said.
appropriate.
That's Jim Turk. You can check out what Jim and his colleagues are doing at Toronto Metropolitan University, the Center for Free Expression. At cfe.torontomu.ca. We'll put that in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. And, of course, you can learn more about the Library Association of Alberta, their advocacy efforts, and the rest by checking out libraryassociationalberta.com. And Real Talkers, we want to know what you think about this as well. Shoot us an email anytime to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Jim, Laura, thank you so much for making time for us, making yourselves available, sharing your expertise. We wanted to enrich our understanding of this, and both of you delivered, so thanks.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for having
on
us.
your show, Ryan.
Yeah, really appreciate it. We'll get to more comments in our live chat in just a moment, and there's a ton of them for sure. Right now, I want to let you know that this conversation simply does not happen without amazing Real Talk partners like our friends at California Closets of Canada. You can find them online at californiaclosets.ca. That's where you can request your free consultation. It all starts with that, a conversation with their world-class designers. Nobody's better in the business than the team at California Closets of Canada. Custom closets, systems, and solutions for the entire home, including garages, by the way. Our family loves what they did for our entertainment center. This was, I don't know, coming up on, well, it's about 8 years ago that we hired California Closets. We had that kind of setup, like the small, TV on top of something that looked absolutely ridiculous, something that's kind of better designed to hold like a gaming unit, but instead it was the focal point of the entire entertainment center. It was a little bit embarrassing when we finally got to a point where we realized we wanted to level up and be proud to host people in that space. But we didn't have a ton of budget. We put that in front of the team at California Closets. We found that sweet spot, something we could afford, and also something that came with that top shelf design that you would expect from the best in the business. We love the confidence that it's guaranteed for life. You can request your free consultation today. Tell them Jespo sent you at californiaclosets.ca. Speaking of wealth, speaking of being smart with your money, team at North Road Investment Council, they are experts in answering questions that may be keeping you up at night. Like, do you have enough to retire? Is this the time to pull out of the market? What's your strategy with cryptocurrency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? North Road certified financial planners, chartered financial analysts can answer your biggest retirement and financial planning questions. They're independent fiduciaries, which means you pay them a per hour fee. You're not paying them commissions that they're making by selling you investment products. So you can have confidence in that. There's no fluff. There's zero pressure, just clear advice and strategies that make sense. Wealth management that aligns with your vision. That's just one of the things that sets them apart. Never mind their digital risk advisory. Nobody else is doing what they're doing. You can find them online at northroadic.com. Hey, family time around the dinner table. That's what Friesen Brothers was built on 70 years ago and still going strong. As a matter of fact, growing in 2025. Congratulations to our friends at Friesen Brothers on their 70th anniversary. Through the year, they're going to have a wonderful lineup of specials and celebrations. We'll keep you posted on those. Remember, you can always check out their website, friesen.com. That's FRESON.com for that family essentials flyer. We love it because it's great food. Comes with recipes, by the way. Quality food for low prices every single day. And make sure you sign up for their Smart Shopper Savings program as well, exclusively at Friesen Brothers, Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And for those of you that are either underemployed, unemployed, or unhappily employed, if you are interested in joining Canada's fastest growing green energy company, that's Kuby. I want to make sure that you check out their website today, kuby.ca. That's kuby.ca. Under Solar by Kuby, you'll find the careers link there. They are always adding to this dynamic team that is shaping the future of energy in Canada. They've currently got openings in Edmonton, Calgary, Kamloops, and Lethbridge, including those of you with your ticket, journey persons, direct sales experts, even an electrical engineer down in Calgary. Your next big career move could start today at kuby.ca. A ton of engagement from Real Talkers on this conversation, and we sure appreciate that. Lori is wondering, shouldn't the government be focused on building public schools, hiring teachers, or maybe getting a deal done, Lori, right? Teachers' aides, EAs, librarians, says it seems like this government, the UCP, is trying to stifle free thinking. Gilles says, my partner's school had a talent show last week where multiple students under the age of 8 stood in front of the school and sang songs about having sex in the back of a pickup truck. He says, and it was encouraged by parents. Gilles goes on to say, it wasn't the teachers teaching them that song either. It was the parents too. Johnny Infamous, Edmonton's most infamous
morning,
DJ, who only spins tunes that are rated G.
No.
For fear of offending the audiences in front of whom you play.
Maybe at the weddings or whatever. But I do. One thing I want to say about this is, I like that you brought it up because I don't think we brought it up yesterday, is that it is. One thing that pisses me off is that they did this ahead of Pride Month. You know, Pride Month is a month where we celebrate queer art in all aspects of life, and I just feel like this was done at a time to kind of preempt that, and I don't think it's by accident. I like to think it wasn't, but it just seems a little. I
like that they did it ahead of Pride. Can I tell you why?
Me as well.
Because it lights a fire under people.
I don't like who and how they did it, but like for me, like you just mentioned, as a DJ, as a guy, as a music man, I feel like our lives would be very dull, very colorless without gay artists, painters, directors. I mean, if I don't have to go down the list of like gay musicians, Freddie Mercury, Elton John, like George Michael, David
John's
Bowie.
gay?
You know what I mean? Or queer in general, people on the spectrum, Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, all these people, right? And then some of my favorite directors. I mean, go to Broadway, any show you're going to see is written by someone, most likely created by someone queer. But like, you know, Gus Van Sant, he wrote Good Will Hunting and directed it. One of my favorite directors, Lee Daniels, Todd Haynes, John Waters, Dee Reese, I could go on and on. But also
John Waters, what a beauty.
Amazing, right?
Best mustache on planet Earth.
And, you know, that's what Pride Month is about for me. For a lot of other people, I know it's more of a revolution. It's about, and the haters and people, conservatives and people on the right who don't like it would say it's about flag waving and all that. And there is a part to that. There is still a revolution going on for human rights right now in this community, in the culture of queerness. But also, like June, I love that it's also, and it kind of gets underplayed because Pride Month is still very important, but Black Music Appreciation Month is also in June in North America. And I feel like if you took those two cultures out of society, what they've given to us musically, black culture and queer culture, we would really, it would just be.
We would just have country music.
No, Jesus Christ, black people invented country music, Ryan. It was stolen from them. Like seriously, like there would be folk music and some forms of folk music and
Symphony.
polka. Seriously, all the major, important, modern, most popular forms of music. I'm talking about rock and roll, country, hip hop, R&B, EDM, disco, funk, jazz, reggae, soul. Every type of music everyone listens to every day was created, derived, or stolen from black or queer culture. And that's just the bottom line. You can go through it all. So for me as not a musician, I hate calling myself a musician, as a guy who plays artist and musician and benefits from them monetarily, I make a choice every June to donate to at least one of each of those, some kind of queer, organization that benefits them, and I definitely go in the States, especially at some form of black music appreciation. You just make a donation because the money I make is literally from their blood, sweat, and tears, right? But I just feel like June is a really important month to me for all of those reasons. And this is one thing here where, writing is art too, right? Books are art too. Whether they're educating or whether they're for entertainment or fantasy or whatever, they're art as well. And I feel like this month was a preemptive attack to try and, downplay what is normally a month to celebrate.
Jillian in our chat, grateful to have her in there, says, be in no doubt that after they get rid of the LGBTQ books, they will then remove the Black Ballerinas kids series, books celebrating black hair and skin, anything that encourages acceptance and diversity. And Bustian says, we already have a system for putting books in the right place. This is a waste of time and money. It's reinventing the overbearing Christian wheel. Melva says, hey, guys, it's the graphic pictures. I don't know. I mean, graphic pictures are everywhere. I mean, I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that we're going to. I mean, it's like, I don't even know if that's a serious comment. Dwayne says, you go to a major shopping mall. What do you see while walking around? Certain stores that have images that maybe aren't great for youngsters to see. Johnny, how many times in your average trip to the mall as a 13-year-old would you walk past Victoria's Secret or La Senza?
And when Jim said it, too, like when I was young, it was so easy to find a Playboy or find explicit music.
Obviously.
And nowadays with the internet, I'm listening to them talk today. I'm listening to the premiers talking about it. I'm listening to these books, and I'm saying, I could turn on Netflix right now and hit any random show in the top 10, and it's going to be worse than these books.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Heidi says parents have a responsibility to have a relationship with their child where they feel comfortable discussing things like this that they may come across in books. By the way, you and I were talking about, you said if you didn't have queer culture, if you didn't have black culture, what would music look like? And I said we'd be left with like
horrible
classical. And then all of a sudden I'm going, hang on a second, I better search queer classical composers. Yeah. I had no idea.
Oh, it's incredible.
And we don't know everything about everybody. So this is just the known. But like, check this out. Some of the all-time absolute. I had no doubt Tchaikovsky was gay. Handel. Yeah. I mean, like, who wrote better holiday music than Handel? Yeah. Nobody. Frederick the Great. Samuel Barber. Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah.
Franz Schubert.
Bernstein, of course.
What about Frederick Chopin? Yeah. Had no idea.
Some of the most, oppressed and tortured people are the greatest artist. And I mean, there's arguments to be made. I was looking at painters the other day ahead of Pride Month. Like, there's arguments to be made that Picasso and Michelangelo were gay. They were just repressed because there was a time when, think of all the art before the last 150 years when you couldn't even say out loud that you were gay, that when you couldn't express yourself that way. So I think some of the most tortured and oppressed people give us some of the best art. And that's, I mean, I won't say a good thing, but that's a good thing that has come out of black culture and queer culture. But I also think, like, this month really is about celebrating. It is also about the revolution. But as for me, like, I have my rights as a straight, white, cisgender guy. Like, there's not much I need. There's not much I need to ask for. So I keep out of that. I try to support the community, but that's how I try to support. I try to celebrate all these artists and people who I have benefit from and piggybacked off of, and who we should be noticing how worse off we would be, how our lives would just be so boring without these cultures.
I appreciate you saying that. Wytrim wonders, why do we constantly treat children like brittle glass? It says they're human beings with all ideas, thoughts, curiosities. It says we need to stop being so soft with kids and what they're exposed to. Listen, like, some of the stuff, I mean, obviously, some of the quotes out of these books are, they're cherry-picked effectively, right? I mean, the government's sort of trying to prove a point here. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff, I mean, I know I've been reading some passages over our recent conversation with Max Fawcett, maybe 5 or 6 episodes ago when we talked about this, and today as well. There are some passages I'm just not going to read that get a little bit heavier, but these are graphic novels, like big, long, as Laura said, like some of the 500-page novels, graphic novels for sort of like preteen or teen-aged audiences that are experiencing these same things themselves, like, rocket ship emotions and unfamiliar feelings and changes with their body and slurs and harmful language and all of the things, right? And so some of the words here that they're calling each other, or some of the insults that are being pulled out of a book. I mean, here's one, like, not the one I'm talking about, but
What's
another. We're each. This is what book is this one? This is from Flamer, which is a graphic novel by Mike Curato. he says, we're each busting a load into this bottle, and if you don't come, you have to drink it. Ha ha ha, give me that, I'll show you. I don't know, man. There's a game called Soggy Cracker that people have been joking about, at least guys. I don't know if girls joke about it. Guys have been joking about Soggy Cracker for like 40 years. That's what this is. That's in a book. That's dumb shit that young people talk about. That's reflected there. Yeah, there are some insults and some words in the book that are kind of like, oof. But also, guess what? In real life, there's insults and words. You're like, woof. I told you we were sitting beside a guy, the most recent round, Dallas Stars. What was it, game 3 or 4, Johnny? Whatever it was. I can't remember what game it was we were at. My wife and I. The guy I was sitting next to had like the wildest language I've ever heard. Honestly, I'm serious. Like at full volume at a hockey game. It was like, dude. But like there were kids there. Your kids are going to hear this stuff. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying you teach them that. But I would also like to know, we've had it with our 9-year-old. From time to time, he drops a word that he's heard somewhere. Sometimes absolutely innocently with no understanding that word could be either hurtful or could land as hurtful with someone. Yeah. And that's an opportunity to talk to him. He's an empathetic, fast-learning, loving kid that wants to know if he's going to hurt people and wants to change his behavior. And you have those opportunities to talk. Just because they read something in a book of one character saying something to another, that's not an endorsement of that behavior from the school system to the home.
No. And, let's just think back. Does nobody remember being in grade 6? The passages from these books, Ryan, are nothing close to how bad me and my friends were talking on the schoolyard during recess, during lunch, about sex and other things we were all wondering about. This is just crazy that these passages are causing people to clutch their pearls. Sure, if it's a kid in kindergarten or whatever, but are they even reading at that level anyways? No. So, I don't see what the big hoopla is about.
I would say
it seems like a distraction to me.
Vamp Fashions, I see you in the live chat, says, I'm not completely sure why Laura, your guest, was presented as a neutral library expert and not as the opinionated activist that she actually is. Man, she's the president of the Library Association of Alberta. She has a grad degree, a master's degree in library studies, and she's an expert in her field. You want to talk about activism. This is activism. Actionforcanada.ca pleased to announce a massive win against pornographic books, a victory for our precious children. Praise God. Thank you to the Alberta Minister of Education for meeting with us, for responding to our concerns, for acknowledging the existence of sexually explicit materials in Alberta schools, a positive step toward restoring morality and common sense in education. That, by definition, is activism. The libraries are not out trying to put, like Laura said, hustler on the shelves. The librarians have not gone rogue. People always make jokes. I have a couple friends that are librarians, and they love it, actually. They love this. But people often joke about how librarians are like the most reserved and conservative people on planet Earth. Probably not. They just work in quiet workspaces. I bet you there's some wild animal librarians.
You take them out to the club at night.
You take a librarian out to the club. But I don't see a lot of librarians campaigning to get more explicit material in libraries. No. That is activism.
Yeah.
Right?
The whole thing is just crazy. This is, it's tame to me. I'm watching the show today, and I was chatting with some people in there, and I just commented how, you turn on any streaming platform right now, and it's way worse than this, and kids are watching that. Yep. Kids are on the internet. I would rather they be exposed to well-written, award-winning literature than the stuff that is on TV and the internet and streaming services. And if I was a parent, I'm not a parent. That's why I normally don't get too worked up when this stuff happens, because I know that there's a perspective that I'm missing here because I haven't experienced it. But if I was a parent, I would want them to have the books before the explicit stuff online.
Yeah. Jay says, I remember this old fella at the public library who had a magnifying glass while looking at the steamy sections in the romance novel. What? Are there pictures? There are not pictures in romance novels, are there?
Oh, gosh.
Maybe the old fella just had it was
I'll tell you what's
hard of seeing.
You know what's wild nowadays? If you want to take a listen, and it's probably something
I can't wait for what you're about to tell us.
Is romantic, sexual audio books. For women and men nowadays.
Yeah.
They are
the ones with Fabio on the cover,
but in audio form.
Oh, so there's
They are.
the panting is actual panting.
I'm telling you right now, you listen to one of these books for like 2 minutes, you're going to need someone to dump a bucket of cold water over your head.
I bet you most people don't make it. Most people don't make it 2 minutes.
It's absolutely insane.
Wow. Have you heard one?
So actually my partner referred to she's like,
you're
have
in
you
trouble
heard
now.
these?
You're in trouble now.
Have you heard these books lately? Because she got wind of them, and I listened to one of them, and I was like, this is. I don't know the word for it. I'm getting sweaty just talking about it.
Karma's loving. But before I move on, actually, do you have one that you'd recommend? Is there a specific?
No. Oh, is somebody asking?
No, I don't know. Yeah, you know,
I'm sure there's a genre or a
We're
section
probably-
on Amazon Books or something.
You know, my wife, Carrie Skelton, the content creator, they'll do these things. People in that industry will have like these affiliate programs where you get like a promo code if we recommend certain books. I bet you and I could have made $1 million on this episode today by referral codes on the books that we're discussing.
Yeah, Tracy in our chat right now says spicy romantic novels are huge right now. There's an entire bookstore in Edmonton called the Book Boudoir that is entirely spicy romantic.
Are people
books.
undersexed?
I don't know. I think what it is we're oversexed in the ways that we're used to now. Like online porn that's just a click away, that can be, moderate to just extreme.
It's like in your face.
It's just a different form. Like everything audio, like ASMR, all that stuff is taking off right now, right? You're like a different form of sensory sexual experience. And this is one of them that is just like out of this world right now.
Yeah. I'm looking online right now, by the way. This one's for free, bookboudoir.ca. For the love of smut. I love that. But I'm actually kind of disappointed in the books. And I'm joking, everyone. But they're not they just look normal. One Golden Summer, Great Big Beautiful Life, Problematic Summer Romance.
I think we should play. I'll go researching tonight. Oh God!
I was
even
expecting
me wading into this is just gonna sound bad, but I'll go researching.
You're gonna
this
research
evening,
smut,
and I'll find us an audio passage from a modern romance novel, and we'll play it on the show tomorrow and see, and we'll zoom in on Ryan's face.
Yeah. Jill says there's a lot of right-wing folks who've been raised with a negative view of sexuality, and they're fighting for that to persist. They're struggling in a society where their views don't fit in at all. And Jill, I think you're right. And again, in the spirit of what we talked about, when I talked about Charles Adler, if you heard that most recent episode, and he asked me a question, and then I kind of like double clutched on it, right? Do you remember specifically what it was? It was like about Alberta separation. It was something. Yeah. But I paused because I could tell, as the veteran Emmy Award-winning talk host that he is, now a senator, obviously, Chuck's really good at getting people in a position where they spill the beans, and when they actually like say what they really think. Like, he was a master of it. As a matter of fact, Charles Adler seriously is the one that got me fired from radio. Like, honestly, Chuck teed me up. Chuck teed me up to speak freely, and I did. And I say that with love and admiration and gratitude. But Charles is like a master of that. And so he like fired back a question at me in our most recent episode, and I paused, and we didn't take it out of the pod. We didn't eliminate my stammering and my and then I shared with you all, those of you that heard that, it's because I'm really trying to make an effort, and this is over the course of my entire career, but especially with this show, with Real Talk, trying to make an effort to not just like dismiss people, laugh people off, call them idiots and morons. We want to hear people out. We want to seek to understand. That does not mean that every view is equal. That does not mean that lunacy is not lunacy. But I'm just saying, I'm trying not to look at like family members of mine, friends of mine that believe that Alberta would be better off as a sovereign nation, or that believe that we should get rid of this smut in school libraries, and automatically look at these people like they're morons, because I guarantee you a lot of the places that these parents are coming from, like we've talked about these books, or these groups rather, Action for Canada, the Parents for Choice in Education. These aren't all like bad people. These are people that care dearly about their children. They care about their families. But like Jill said, they're raised in a context, and I don't speak for everybody, obviously, but I was raised in a very conservative, right-wing, evangelical ecosystem. I understand it, man. I understand what it's like to have, your exposure, your understanding of sex to come from Dr. James Dobson as opposed to like blankets, right? I get that. And the religious folks will probably know that name, Focus on the Family. These people are not inherently bad people. I mean, I'm sure there's some bad actors like there are with any group. But like Jill said, that's their frame of reference. That's how they grew up. And I think for a lot of people that believe that sex outside of marriage is a sin. They believe that homosexuality is a sin. They have all very strong views on fornication and remaining a virgin until you're married and all these types of things. Then they see passages like we've been sharing today. They hear about these books. Some of the fear-mongering kind of sets in. They recognize that their kids could have access to something where they're reading about jerking off into a bottle and then drinking the cum, and they go, oh my God, that's not something that we would ever talk about as a family. That's not how our family rolls, and so we don't want our kids being exposed to that. The problem with all of this is that kids are going to figure that stuff out. That's like, to speak very frankly and plainly, you're like 12-year-old little boy. He's coming of age. He's becoming an adult. He's going to wake up in the morning from time to time with a boner, and he's going to wonder what that is and what to do with it. And whether you've talked about it or not, he's going to figure it out, right? And so I hope that if nothing else, your face when I said boner was just amazing.
All these words you're saying right now are great for clips.
Real talk. Our short is going to be unreal today.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I hope more than anything else that this prompts conversations around family dinner tables, that it prompts conversations in the car. You're driving your little one I mean, we're talking teenagers. We're talking about kids that are like, I saw a show the other day. We were watching this series, my wife and I, and there's kind of like this young
What's
kid that's got a girlfriend. It's called Hacks.
Okay.
But there's like this like younger, he's a young adult, but he's with his girlfriend, and they're talking, and they're kind of going back and forth, and then his aunt says to him, hey, make sure you wear a condom tonight. And the parents are like shocked. They're like blown away because the aunt says, make sure you wear a condom tonight. But like, actually, I've shared a lot about what it was like for me to come from private Christian school, grade 9, to get into public school in grade 10. Mm-hmm. The absolute culture shock that I experienced, where they were teaching evolution in the classroom and kids were laughing at creationism, and I took it as a personal attack on myself, where the guys, keep in mind I was in Calgary, right? Like every second guy had like the chewing tobacco, the chew tin circle in his back pocket. You could wear baseball caps inside. Yeah. Students were telling teachers to go fuck themselves. I couldn't believe it. Like at private Christian school, you'd be strapped you'd be strapped and then expelled if you did that. But I remember learning or understanding very quickly that some of my peers were already sexually active.
And they were
like 15, 16 years old. And I was like, whoa.
And they were not just that, they were probably likely ahead of you just knowledge-wise. And
sure.
Just, you know what I mean? And that
probably still are.
That helps with development. But one of the things like that bothers me about this is like, okay, let's ban some books first. But then like I was just saying, there's way worse on the internet. It's a slippery slope. So what's next? No computers in school? Like, you know what I mean? To me, it's like, it's just a slippery slope. And now I told you yesterday, we're seeing this stuff in Texas where they just passed the law. Governor's going to sign it this week. They're putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom on the wall. And don't get me wrong, I don't think the 10 Commandments is inherently wrong. In fact, I think it's the moral, like it's, I agree with all the 10 Commandments.
Can we all agree with
steal,
do not murder,
don't
do not
kill,
steal? Yeah.
Don't, have sex with your neighbor's wife. I get it. It's morality. But what I see is people of other religion, other cultures walking into a classroom, the Hindu, the Sikh, the Muslim, the Buddhist, whoever, the atheist, and seeing a sign on the wall, not the 10 Commandments, that says you're not welcome here. You know what I mean? So I just think all of this stuff, when we start banning things, like what are we talking about here? Is it 1940, Ryan? Banning books in schools? It's a really slippery slope.
Can you imagine an initiative to put like pages from the Quran up in schools? Imagine how that would land.
Already you've got pushback. I mean, there was literally a pastor in the Senate like arguing against this, saying he was against it, saying it's too far. Like he's a believer of God, he's a preacher of God, and he said it was going too far. But like, yeah, can you imagine like some of the teachers already are online on X and Twitter saying, that's fine, I'm just going to put all the other well,
why not?
Religious.
Are you telling me that every single person in the state of Texas is an evangelical Christian? I mean, I bet there's a lot, but there's a lot in southern Alberta as well. I bet there's a lot in the country. Obviously, a lot of people profess to be Christian. That's fine, but there's also a lot of people that would profess other religions. And how is it fair in a public school system to have that? Boom Shanker X in the live chat says, I'm a conservative, but banning books is not a good look. Many of you are just grateful to hear those guests on. Appreciate that. Aaron says, because I didn't have a bunch of access to books when I was growing up, I used my aunt's bookshelf. Danielle Steele's Zoya, she says, was one of the first. I was probably 10 years old. She says, that explains a lot. I don't know that book. Danielle Steele, I know, is like a legend who's made $1 billion, Johnny, peddling smut. I'm joking. Maybe Zoya is where you should start tonight. PNC Bio says, I remember how badly I wanted to be chaste. When I was a teenager, all I was interested in was Bible studies and Hardy Boys mystery books. You and me both, PNC, 100%. GE says book banners are dangerous, repressed people. I promised you they were never allowed any fun, never allowed to be themselves, never allowed to learn about sex, and now they want the same for kids. Michael says, I remember when Two Live Crew had a band album in the 90s, and all of a sudden they were everywhere at school. Hey, do you remember that?
Of course.
I mean, Two Live Crew and like Body Count.
I mean,
like
I
all
remember
of those bands.
I remember the exact blatantly obscene first album I got that I thought I was the badass kid ever to have was NWA.
Oh, yeah.
And just listen, like me thinking about that right now, I'm like, that album audio alone is way worse than all the things you're reading on the show from these books today. And kids have access to every song in the world right now. And a lot of music nowadays is sexually explicit. So if you think some of these passages in these books are going to like blow the heads off kids nowadays, you're way, way off. Kids are way, I like how Jim said it. He's like, kids these days are way ahead of what we think they are in terms of knowledge of the world and sex and all these other things. Boom Shack X on YouTube. Yeah, new guy in our chat today.
Oh, amazing.
Says the problem is one side is always trying to impose their will on the other. We need to make room for different perspectives. I agree with you.
I 100% agree.
But the difference is like queer culture and someone who's queer, that's not a belief or an opinion. Like they're born this way and they're living that way. Religion is like a belief and it forms certain opinions in you. The other side is just trying to live, like just trying to be like everyone else.
I saw
just
this
trying to love.
exchange on social the other day where somebody had shot a photo of a fire engine, the fire truck, and had the pride flag on it. What did they say? I prefer my first responders stay out of politics, or you know, I prefer politics out of my first responders, or something like that. But then we've had these debates on the show before, and I have these conversations most comfortably with members of LGBTQ community as opposed to us speaking on their behalf. But I will say that in interviews that I've done, people will say, you'll hear someone say, pride is not political. In other words, talking about my identity, my sense of self is not political. Others say, you better believe that pride is political. I saw a good friend of this show, Scarlett, post something on her Instagram yesterday, something along the lines of, she said you're going to see like corporations and agencies, you'll have like, Walmart and McDonald's are going to do their pride stuff. She says, but pride was founded with basically protest with people like pushing society and forcing equality and measures to reflect that society is more than just this homogenous understanding that some people believe everyone should subscribe to, or the way that everyone is wired. And that's not the case that it is.
Those big protests we saw back in the day in California, Toronto, Montreal, where people were like fighting for their lives. That's what it came out of. And that's why today I was trying to be careful when I say like, I understand the revolution side of Pride Month. I know that's important. But for me, I try to turn it into a celebration because, I'm not gay. I'm not queer. I want to support, but I don't know what my place is. So I try to find a place that is suitable for me. And for me, it's everything I play as a DJ and music, I owe to those people. So
just Google the Stonewall Uprising if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about the root of it. I see. Go ahead, Johnny.
Everyone in the chat's saying their first really explicit album now that they got.
Oh, is that right?
Prince's 99, Dr. Dre, 1999, Dr. Dre, 2001.
What was yours?
I said NWA.
NWA was like unquestionably
the first one I can remember where I was like, whoa.
Mine was
these guys are talking about stuff I haven't really heard.
Yeah,
about.
I think GNR Appetite for Destruction was probably the one
that's a good one too.
Yeah. Noob Try Again says that the Take Back Alberta, the sort of Saving Childhood initiative, trying to take over our school board. Says Noob says they started last year and succeeded, and are trying to further that agenda at our AGM today. I was going to save this for the flamethrower on Friday, but I'll read it now. This is from Touring Zebra. To talk at RyanJespersen.com says, I caught your episode. You're discussing the library materials guidelines. They're talking about my chat with Max Fawcett. Over in Alberta, Touring Zebra says your guest, Max, talked about other pressing issues that this matter may be obfuscating. Oh, man, that's one of my favorite words. Such as healthcare scandals, coal mining, separatism. But I do agree that healthcare and measles are serious concerns. But I don't see the book guidelines as a distraction, says Touring Zebra. The finish line for many who are righteously indignant is quite not guidelines, but rather book bans or like an approved list of books for schools outside of which you may never venture. It says for 20 years, I've worked with very few conservative culture groups as a teacher and an administrator. And the number one concern that gets people most upset is books. People from authoritarian cultures recognize that reading brings knowledge and knowledge brings freedom. So they insist that people only have access to approved materials. And the control is so firm that in many circumstances that I'm aware of, people have even been discouraged from studying the Bible on their own. Orwellian sort of approved reading materials is a very concerning path to tread. And I think this is how it begins. The fact that these books address topics of sexuality, 2S LGBTQI makes it that much more easier to get many people on board with the idea. And until further evidence is provided to explain where these books were, who actually had access to them, I believe that this is a manufactured issue. Schools always have books in their collections that are not for student circulation. These books may be for teacher use only, related to curriculum, or because the staff has maybe determined that some sections may not be appropriate, but others are. So they selectively use those sections with their students. Therapists and counselors likely have resources they may choose to share with individuals, sometimes with parental discussion. And those books may not be available to all students in the library. The books will have a barcode. They'll be in the catalog so that anybody's interested in manipulating a situation, they can show everybody that these books are in the library since they show up in the catalog. Touring Zebra, that's a great point, by the way, says, I don't know if the situation applies with these books that have been singled out, but there's likely more to the story. There's always more to the story. Says, while the government has asked for input, the survey very much appears to be set up to move toward a particular result and end goal. Seek out that survey. If you've listened to this and you're feeling fired up, you're feeling motivated, just Google Alberta Government Library Book Survey and have your say. Let us know what you've thought about it. Let us know what you said. Dorothy says, my team wants to read Under Bridge. There's all these books. I mean, honestly, I need to read more. I'm embarrassed. Dorothy says, I've looked at the readings on this book, and I feel like, I don't know. I feel like if I don't allow my family member to read this at home, she's going to read it elsewhere. She says that's today's problem, right? This is the idea. It's not like just because you can't get something at home or at the school library, you're not going to access it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The
White
other
Dream
thing
heard
is,
the quote about nipples, by the way. It says malls have models with nipples everywhere. Oh, the horror.
I also think, and I'll play the devil's advocate. I think if this was in the curriculum, if these were like, books being read in class, homework assignments on, but that's not. They're just books that are in the library. Mm-hmm. They're just a few books, a few passages, a few sentences, Ryan, from a few books that they found. And the other thing is, it was some parent who went into the library and spent like 3 weeks there and was like, I'm going to do all I can to find these few sentences from these few books. I mean, let's see the book as a whole, not as a sentence from the 7th chapter, right?
Karma's Loving Backhand says it won't be long until you can get dildos as a prize at Chuck E. Cheese. Will that be progress?
I don't think we'll get there. And I don't see.
This
is what I mean, though.
People can use anything as a dildo. I'll also say that. Just because you don't have dildos available doesn't mean people aren't going to get themselves off. Let's also be real about that.
You're saying a lot of words today.
A lot of things.
Jespo.
A lot of words.
Super Chat Ken says $5. He just sent in the Super Chat for you to stop saying the word boner.
I only said it one time. What would you prefer? Hard on?
I think that was enough for Super Chat Ken.
Okay. He says, you said boner. Expect a minister press announcement and a survey as they come after Real Talk. Ken K, $5 to stop saying boner. Why do you guys want me to stop saying boner? Adam, $15. Oh, Adam. See, this is an astute marketing move from Adam, and we're going to give him this because I actually love this guy.
I see what he did here.
You see what this guy did here, this bastard, Adam? Yeah. I love this guy. Adam C. Adam, you're being outed now because you did this, and so you're getting what you asked for. Adam C. a valued and beloved member of our Real Talk audience is the owner of Analog Brewing.
Okay.
Analog Brewing, by the way, is doing a custom brew for us. I'm actually blowing the doors off a secret right now. A custom brew for us that will be unveiled at the Real Talk Golf Classic, which we're really excited about. But Adam and his colleagues at Analog today, Adam, I hope this is public because we're announcing it, in partnership with their colleagues at the Growlery and at Dog Island Brewing out of Slave Lake, are opening the Den. And this is a tap room in Mercer Warehouse right below our studio, 2 floors down from our studio, and they are soft opening today, although I guess it's a hard open, if you know what I mean. Now that we've announced it on Real Talk, congratulations to you all, to the friends of ours at Analog Brewing, Dog Island Brewing, and the Growlery, opening the Den in Mercer Warehouse today at 3 o'clock.
First of all, we're not going to get anything done today. Second of all, what a move, opening it the day before the Stanley Cup final. Way to go.
And also, they were ready to open like weeks ago.
And they held off.
Well, let's just say that the red tape now that stands in the way of people that are trying to open. Went and checked out a wonderful Mexican restaurant as well, just west of Edmonton's downtown in Manchester Square the other day. They've been open for like a month and a half. Beautiful spot, phenomenal food. I said, yeah, just a couple of cold beers, please. She says, she kind of looks at me. She goes, we don't have any booze. I said, how come? She goes, yeah, we're still waiting for our liquor license. I said, how long have you been open? She goes, yeah, like a month and a half. Still waiting for their liquor license. I recommended to Adam that they just open their tap room without a liquor license. I said, take it back to the old school, man. Do it like they used to do it. He said, yeah, it's not worth it.
Open it like a fire hydrant. Just let the taps run free.
Wheeze the juice, man.
Down the steps,
in the juice.
out into the street.
Congratulations, Adam, and thanks for the... See, Adam knows Adam's getting his $15 back. It's not really like truly... It's not truly a gift because he knows we're just going to go spend it in his bar like in half an hour from now. I want to thank everybody that took the time. Obviously, we're having some fun now. Matthew with $10 now in the Super Chat says, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. We're now buying Super Chats so that Jespo says boner.
Well, he keeps saying it, so if you keep Super Chatting it, yeah.
He says, just kidding, but this was a fantastic episode and it made my whole day. So that's good. I'm not going to say boner anymore, you guys. At least until tomorrow's show. I don't know where tomorrow's show is going to go.
A reminder to all the supporters throwing in the Super Chat today. You can become a monthly supporter by going to our homepage on YouTube and hitting join. 3 levels of membership, and the second and third tiers VIP. And Real Deal members get access to our members-only live chat on Discord.
100%. We've got some big episodes coming up over the next couple of days, including a high-profile labor lawyer that's going to be joining us in studio on our next episode. That's going to be the 4th of June. Going to give us the inside scoop on what he thinks about the Canada Post situation, as well as the Alberta separation talk. He's done some real digging into the legal implications of all this. He's more on the right side of the spectrum. Actually, he's, further on the right side of the spectrum, and a very good friend of mine, so I'm looking forward to what he has to offer up. You can send us your thoughts in advance anytime to talk@ryanjespersen.com. And as we wrap, John, I wanted to save this for the very end. Real Talkers, I didn't share this with you through the show because it's life, but today marks 1 year since I lost my best friend in the world, and I just wanted to let you know today that I have one thing that I want you to do, and that's take a second. Take 5 minutes to send a text or make a phone call to somebody you love and tell them exactly that. You never know when that door might close. Love you. See you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.